Green card travel safety. Is it safe to travel with a green card right now? Yusuf had been a green card holder for 8 years. He went home to visit his sick mother, stayed 3 months, and came back through the airport like he had done many times before. This time, CBP pulled him aside, took his green card, and told him his residency was abandoned. He spent 2 days detained before an attorney could intervene. Green card travel is not as simple as it used to be, and the rules have not changed as much as the enforcement has. I'm Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, an Austin immigration attorney, and I want to tell you exactly what is happening at U.S. borders right now and what you need to know before you travel. If you are a green card holder thinking about traveling outside the United States, you are right to be asking this question. The answer is not don't travel, and it is not everything is fine. The answer is that you need to understand the specific risks before you go, and you need to make a plan. Let me give you that information so you can decide what makes sense for your situation. What a green card actually means for travel. A green card makes you a lawful permanent resident, but permanent does not mean unconditional. Your residency comes with an implied obligation to actually live here. The government's position is that your primary home, your center of life, needs to be in the United States. Travel is allowed. Extended travel is where the problems start. There are two rules most people know about but do not fully understand. First, if you are outside the United States for 6 months to a year on a single trip, that creates a presumption that you may have abandoned your residency. Second, if you are outside for more than a year without a reentry permit, you are at serious risk of losing your permanent resident status entirely. But here is the part that surprises people. The 6-month rule is not a safe harbor. CBP can challenge your residency even if you are under 6 months if the pattern of your travel suggests that you have been spending more time abroad than in the United States. It is not just about any single trip. It is about the totality of your situation. What CBP can do at the border. Customs and Border Protection officers have significant authority when you attempt to re-enter the United States. They can ask you detailed questions about your travel. They can review your travel history, your financial records, your phone and its contents, and your documents. They can detain you for secondary inspection. CBP can detain you, pressure you to sign Form I-407, voluntarily relinquishing your status, or issue a notice to appear, placing you in removal proceedings before an immigration judge. Do not sign anything without speaking to an attorney. This is not theoretical. According to recent reports, green card holders have been held at airports for hours or days, questioned extensively about their intentions and their ties to the United States, and in some cases have had their green cards confiscated pending removal proceedings. The situations that most commonly trigger this are long trips, patterns of repeated short trips that add up to more time abroad than at home, minimal demonstrable ties to the U.S. when asked, and travel to or through countries on the government's heightened scrutiny list. Countries and routes that trigger more scrutiny. Certain travel raises more red flags than other travel. Trips to or through countries that the U.S. government considers high risk, including several in the Middle East and North Africa, parts of Central Asia, and countries with current travel advisories, tend to generate more secondary inspections. Connecting through certain airports in countries under travel restrictions can also create complications even if your final destination itself is not flagged. If your travel history shows patterns that suggest frequent extended trips to countries on these lists, you are more likely to face close questioning on return. This is not necessarily about what you have done. It is about what the system flags when your passport is scanned and an officer pulls up your travel record. There is also the question of what an officer finds when they look at your phone. Border agents in the United States have broad authority to search devices at ports of entry, and courts have been slow to restrict that authority for non-citizens, including green card holders. If your phone contains communications that could be misread or mischaracterized, if it contains contacts or group chats that might look suspicious out of context, that is worth thinking about before you travel. This is not about having something to hide. It's about how the reality of how these encounters can unfold and what you can do to reduce unnecessary complications before they happen. How long can you actually be outside the U.S.? Here's practical guidance. Under 6 months on a single trip is generally lower risk, but it is not risk-free. CBP can still ask questions. They can still challenge you if your overall pattern raises concerns. Between 6 months and 12 months on a single trip creates real vulnerability. You will likely need documentation of your ties to the United States, like employment records, lease agreements, tax returns, U.S.-based family members, evidence that your life is actually centered here. Over 12 months without a reentry permit is high-risk territory. If you have already been outside the United States for more than 12 months, you may need a returning resident visa from a U.S. consulate before you can even board a plane to come back. That process is separate and involves its own challenges. The question CBP is trying to answer is not just how long you were gone, it is where you actually live. If the answer starts to look like somewhere else, your green card is at risk regardless of the specific length of your most recent trip. Reentry permits, what they are and when you need one. If you know in advance that you're going to be outside the United States for more than a year, you should apply for a reentry permit before you leave. A reentry permit does not guarantee that you will be allowed back in, but it is evidence that you planned ahead, that you did not intend to abandon your residency, and that you anticipated a return. It is valid for up to 2 years. You must apply while you are still in the United States because the application requires you to be present here while it is processed. If you are already outside the U.S. without a reentry permit and you have been there more than a year, call an immigration attorney before you try to return. Your options are different at that point, but they still exist. You may need to apply for a returning resident visa at a U.S. consulate abroad, which involves documenting your ties and intentions. Do not just show up at the airport hoping it will work out. The last thing you want is to be refused boarding or detained on arrival because you did not take the right steps in advance. What CBP officers are actually looking for. When you arrive at the border, CBP officers are trying to determine one thing. Is this person actually a resident of the United States, or are they using a green card as a convenient travel document while living somewhere else? The questions they ask are designed to figure that out. Where do you work? Where do your kids go to school? Where do you file taxes? Where is your house? If your answers are vague, if you hesitate, if the documents you are carrying suggest your life is based abroad, the conversation changes. Some green card holders maintain residences in 2 countries. Some have family obligations abroad that require extended presence. Those situations are not automatically disqualifying, but they require documentation and often legal guidance. If your life looks complicated on paper, the time to address that is before you travel, not when you are standing in front of an officer who has already flagged your record. What to bring when you travel. Every time you re-enter the United States as a green card holder, be prepared. Bring your green card. Bring your passport. If you are returning from a longer trip, bring documentation that shows your life is based here. A recent pay stub, a lease or mortgage statement, a bank statement with U.S. transactions, utility bills, a letter from an employer confirming your job. These documents are not legally required at the border, but if you are pulled for secondary inspection, having them available changes the entire dynamic of that conversation. CBP officers want to see that you live here. Make it easy for them to see it. Do not rely solely on a green card in your wallet and hope that's enough. When not to travel. There are situations where I tell clients to hold off on international travel entirely until certain things are resolved. If you are in the middle of any immigration proceeding, including a pending naturalization application, do not travel without consulting with your attorney first. If you have any criminal history, any arrests, any complications in your file, get a legal review before you travel. If your green card is expired or will expire while you are abroad, renew it before you go. If you have already been outside the country for more than 6 months cumulatively in the past year, think very carefully before another extended trip. One scenario I want to name specifically. People who have elderly parents or sick family members abroad are sometimes in an impossible situation. They need to go. They cannot leave. For those families, the answer is not just stay home. The answer is to do the preparation so that the trip is as protected as possible. Get a reentry permit if the trip will be long. Build the documentation file before you leave. Have an attorney review your situation so you know exactly where the risk is and what the plan is if something goes wrong at the border. You should not have to choose between your family and your immigration status, but you should go into that trip with open eyes. And if you are planning a trip and something just feels uncertain to you, that instinct is worth paying attention to. It is much easier to talk through the risks with an attorney before you leave than to deal with the consequences while you are detained at the airport. The bottom line. Yusuf eventually got his case resolved. An attorney was able to demonstrate that he had strong ties to the United States, that his extended absence was connected to a genuine family emergency, and that he had no intention of abandoning his residency. He was allowed to re-enter, but it was a traumatic experience, and much of it could have been avoided with better preparation before the trip. If you are planning international travel, prepare the same way you would prepare for anything else that matters. Know the rules, know the risks, know what you are going to say if someone asks. If you are worried about what the government can actually do to your green card right now, watch my video on whether Trump can revoke your green card. The link is right here. If you are planning international travel and you want to make sure your situation is protected, talk to an immigration attorney before you go. At Lincoln-Goldfinch Law, we help permanent residents protect their status. Visit lincolngoldfinch.com. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next.